Some people, when they're hurt, don't make a sound. They don't slam doors. They don't send the message they drafted at 2 a.m. They just become slightly less there. And by the time you notice the distance, they've already made a decision you didn't know was being made. There's this assumption most people carry about emotional pain, that it demands expression. That hurt has to go somewhere visible. It has to raise its voice or break down or demand to be acknowledged. But there's a third response that never gets talked about. It doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly closes a door, and the person on the other side keeps smiling, keeps functioning, keeps showing up, while something inside them has already gone still. This is about those people. And if something about that already feels uncomfortably familiar, keep watching. To understand why some people go silent when they're hurting, you have to go back further than the moment the hurt happened. When a child grows up in an environment where expressing pain leads to punishment, or something almost worse than punishment, nothing, the nervous system starts making calculations. It starts learning what's safe and what isn't. And over time, it arrives at a very quiet conclusion. Vulnerability is dangerous. The psychologist John Gottman spent decades studying how parents respond to their children's emotions. What his research on emotion-dismissing parenting consistently showed was that children who are repeatedly met with silence, irritation, or dismissal when they express pain don't just learn to stop expressing it, they learn to distrust it. They begin to treat their own inner experience as something excessive, something not worth voicing, something that makes things worse, not better. And that's a completely different thing from choosing silence as a strategy. One is a choice. The other is a belief, and it gets built into the architecture of how a person moves through the world. It follows them into every relationship they'll ever have. So, when someone hurts them as an adult, a partner, a friend, a colleague, they don't fight back. They don't break down. They reach inward instead of outward. And to the people around them, this can look like indifference, like they don't care enough to say something. But here's what most people never notice. It's almost always the opposite. They go quiet because it matters, because speaking out loud means hoping someone will actually hear them, and hoping means risking the possibility that no one will. That risk, the risk of reaching out and being dismissed again, is something their entire nervous system has spent years learning to avoid. The relationship matters. The moment matters. They go quiet precisely because it matters too much to survive being wrong about. And here's something that takes a while to really understand about them. Their silence isn't passive. It's doing an enormous amount of work. It's containing grief, managing expectations, maintaining a kind of dignity that doesn't require an audience. And behind the calm, sometimes behind a smile, there's a constant, quiet internal process running. Is this person safe? Is it worth trying? Will they understand, or will I just end up feeling smaller for having said anything at all? All of that behind a face that looks completely fine, because they've had a lot of practice at looking fine. Think about someone like this. Not a specific person, but a pattern that plays out in living rooms and offices and cars all across this country every single day. She's in a long-term relationship. One night her partner makes an offhand comment about her in front of their friends. Something small, a throwaway line. He's already moved on to the next topic before the words have fully landed. She laughs. She excuses herself for a moment, stands in front of a bathroom mirror for 3 seconds, and then walks back out and spends the rest of the evening being perfectly pleasant. On the drive home, he asks if she's okay. She says yes, and she means it, in the sense that she has already folded the hurt into a drawer somewhere deep and closed it. He doesn't ask again, because there's nothing visible to ask about. 3 weeks later, she's slightly less available. Not consciously. Just less there. Less warm in the small ways that are hard to name. He can't quite put his finger on it. She couldn't fully explain it even if she tried, and the distance grows, slowly and silently, from something so small it never even had a name. That's the thing about this pattern. The wound is almost never the big dramatic argument. It's the small moments that never got spoken, and eventually there are enough of them that the unsaid starts to take up more space than everything that was ever said out loud. But here's what most people never realize, and this part matters. It doesn't just live in the emotions. There's a physiological cost to this kind of silence. Research coming out of UC Berkeley found that when people suppress emotional expression, their outward behavior decreases, but the inward physiological response doesn't. It actually intensifies. The body holds what the face isn't showing: elevated cardiovascular arousal, sympathetic nervous system activation. The hurt doesn't disappear because it was never expressed. It just moves somewhere no one can see it anymore. And that has consequences. For physical health over time, yes. But more than that, for intimacy. Because you cannot be truly close to someone who doesn't believe closeness is safe. You can be near them. You can share a home with them, sit across from them every morning, sleep beside them every night, and still not be close to them. Because closeness requires a kind of openness that these people have had to strategically shut down just to survive. But here's what doesn't always get said about this. It doesn't have to stay this way, because here's what these people actually do when they go quiet. They don't just retreat, they watch. They watch to see if you notice that something shifted. They watch to see if you come back without being asked, to see if, without a single word being spoken, you pick up on the fact that something changed. And if you do, if you reach for them without being prompted, that can be more healing than almost anything they could have said out loud. Because what they're testing, usually without consciously knowing they're doing it, is whether you actually see them. Not the performance, not the fine. Them. Whether their pain registers even when they're not making it easy for you to see. If you do see it, something in them quietly recalibrates. If you don't, they file that information away. They revise their understanding of how safe this relationship really is, quietly, without a word. And this is the part that makes the pattern so hard to break from the outside. Grand gestures don't reach these people. Dramatic declarations don't move them the way you'd expect. What actually changes something for them is far smaller and far harder to sustain. Consistent, patient presence, showing up without making it into a production, asking gently and not making the asking feel like a burden, staying when the silence gets heavy. That's what slowly teaches a nervous system trained to expect danger that maybe, this time, safety, is actually on the table. It takes time. It doesn't happen in one conversation or one honest moment, though those matter. It happens in the accumulation of small, unremarkable moments where someone expected to be dismissed and wasn't, where they expected to be too much and found out they weren't, where the silence was met not with frustration or distance, but with someone simply staying close and not requiring anything from them in return. That's what turns the dial. Not a single dramatic breakthrough, but the slow, steady weight of evidence that something is different here. There's something else worth sitting with. These people often don't fully recognize this pattern in themselves. They know they go quiet. They know they pull back, but they interpret it as being easygoing, as being low maintenance, as not wanting to cause problems. And on the surface, in a way, that's true. But underneath that is something that's working very hard, protecting, containing, measuring, deciding. The silence was never nothing. It was always doing something. Survival strategies are built for the conditions that created them. And for a long time, maybe a very long time, this one worked. It kept something intact. It prevented a specific kind of pain that felt unsurvivable. But survival strategies don't always know when the conditions have changed. They don't automatically update. They keep running even in rooms where they're no longer needed, even with people who would actually stay, even in a life that has quietly become safer than the one they were originally built for. And that might be the most important thing to understand about people who go quiet when they're hurt. The silence isn't a statement about you. It isn't coldness. It isn't apathy. It's the most careful thing they know how to do. It's what was left when every other option felt too dangerous to try.